Hi, this is Amy from Sew Simple of Lynchburg, and I'm getting ready to show you how to put together our row. So this is an all applique row, and I'm going to step to the side here. You can see it's a long row, and the applique reaches from one side all the way over for the scenery in the background. And I'm going to show you a way that I appli-piece this background. So I'm hoping it will help you. And let me give you a little peek around the shop. We got some Christmas fabric in. You can't see it though. There's some more fabric. There's our row. We've also got Row by Row Junior this year. There's all my beautiful glide threads. And oh, my naked ladies. Gonna have to get some beautiful fabric on those girls. Anyway, let's get on with the tutorial. Alright, so now we're back in my studio and I'm going to show you the full-size pattern. Bring this down so you can see. So the technique I'm using is my own adaptation of Carol Breyer-Fallert's Appli-piecing. I know a lot of people are using this technique now. It's kind of a hybrid between applique and piecing, therefore Appli-piecing. So Carol works from the front of her designs, and my adaptations, I work from the back of the design. It just works for me. So I am reversing my pattern. So I've got my original pattern. When you pick up our row by row kit at the shop, the pattern is already reversed for you, because I know a lot of people are going to use fusible applique. So they use their fusible web to trace the shapes. So I've reversed it. Makes it a lot easier. And then also for my appli-piecing, I'm working from the back. So I trace from the reverse pattern. So this is freezer paper that has had 2 layers ironed together. You know, that plastic coating on freezer paper works like a fusible. So I'm going to show you how I do that a little closer. Just wanted to give you an overall view because these pieces are very long. And that's why I wanted to show you this video and why this technique works really well for getting these hills and sky and foreground hills all put together. Okay, so I have moved our pattern out of the way, and I've got my template pieces here. And of course, this is what I use to make our pattern. And so it's already been cut apart and used once. So we're just going to squeeze them together nice and tight so that they look like one. So I traced the whole background pattern with this one sheet of freezer paper, and then I gave us registration lines so that I can assemble it without everything shifting. You know, these curves, they can really shift on you, so you want to have registration lines. And one thing I'm really bad about doing, since I work from the back side of my quilt, is I keep forgetting to put my registration lines longer. And this is one benefit if you use Carol's method of working from the front. You can use shorter tick marks because you're folding the fabric around itself and not using the freezer paper. So I'm just going to lengthen these just so it's easier for you to see as I do it. And it's not anything real technical. You're just drawing a line. I see I can do one right here. And because when it's cut apart, that's going to be left, and you just line those up. I like to do a lot like garment patterns, sometimes a series of lines, just so that I know where these 3 are is where this piece is. If I did all straight lines, I might get a little shifted and be trying to match up the same or the wrong set of lines to each other. So we've got them like that, and I'm going to pretend like we're cutting them apart. So we've got them apart, and I am going to get some of this fabric prepared and get right back to you, and we'll continue with our tutorial. Okay, so now I'm at my ironing table, and I've got my pattern laid out on my sky blue fabric. You guys can see. And this is the top of the pattern. So I've got a little extra hanging over the edge here, just because I'm going to trim it back when I'm done. I like to leave a little extra and then trim it down. And I'm darkening some of these lines here because I want you to make sure you can see this is the edge of the pattern piece here. Not sure if you can see that real well in the camera. Right here along this edge, that's the edge of the actual pattern. So you can see I've got a generous bit of overlap, both with my pattern and my fabric, just to make sure that things aren't going to shift and I'm going to run out of fabric. And then I just use my iron. This is the dull side of the freezer paper, the paper side, and on the back side is the glossy side, and that is what acts as a fusible to iron to your fabric. Love my little cordless iron. It's perfect for these kinds of things. Now my sky is going to be the very background piece. So other than trimming along this curved edge here, down to around 1/4 of an inch away from the pattern piece, I don't have to do anything else with this. So I'm just going to trim this down. Okay, so I've trimmed up the blue side, the sky. I don't have to do any preparation for the blue edge because that's not being folded under. It's going to be the background layer. So I went ahead and started prepping the green hills. And you see I've already started here. And this is where my way of doing appli-piecing differs from Carol Breyer-Fallert. Like I said, she works from the front. She will put the freezer paper on the front of the fabric and then fold the fabric under, which would be folding the right edge to the back. And for me, I just find that I keep peeling too far on that freezer paper and my fabric starts peeling away from the edge. So just like with English paper piecing, making all those little hexagons, and quite a few other methods of folded edge applique, I like to push my fabric over the freezer paper. It makes it a little harder, and of course the blue is not getting folded over the green. Let me move the green down here a little bit so you can see it. So I fold it over, and the way I keep mine folded over, every once in a while I change and try to use glue. I don't use glue. I prefer to use a little bit of spray starch in a cup and a paintbrush. And the starch I use is just plain old Niagara. I like the pump type spray starch. I just recently got in some products from Soak Company. I've got the flatter here. Haven't had a chance to try it out and see if that'll work better for me, or even the Mary Ellen's Best Press, but I like just plain old starch. So I just, well, first of all, in the interior curves, you need to give a little bit of a snip. I don't know if you can see that right here. The fabric's been snipped in the deep parts of the curve, which this pattern's got a pretty gentle slope on all of it, so it's not too complex to get these shapes folded over. So I've already snipped along here, so it's ready to be folded down. And I just take my starch on my paintbrush and put it in here. Pretty low tech. Get it nice and wet. And I'm using just my regular iron tonight. My little clover iron, which I love, is lost in our move somewhere. But that is one of those little miniature irons. Almost looks kind of like a curling iron. And I do love that for this kind of work, because I can just really get in there nice and neat. You can see how nicely that edge folds over, and it stays down really well with the starch. And do a little bit more over here. I'm not saturating it so much that the fabric or that the paper is getting soggy. Don't want that. I haven't trimmed this other curve. So let me slide that down so you can see that. I love these little Fisker snips. They're not really scissors, they're spring-loaded. They remind me of pruning shears. I'll work backwards so I don't have to move the camera, and I don't want to flip this whole piece around. But again, this pattern doesn't have very deep curves, so just a couple of little snips and you've got all you need. You don't want to snip all the way up to the edge, just enough to ease that so when it gets into that curve, it can split right there and just fold over nice and neat. Get my iron. Got a little sizzle going on. And I'm going to finish that up and we'll get to the next step. All right, so I've been pressing down my edges here using that starch. And I want to show what happened right here. See, it's kind of pointy right here for my hill. It's trying to turn itself into a mountain. And it's just really easy to fix something like that. You just pop your fingernail up underneath that seam allowance and it pops right loose because it's not glue. And I can just take a little bit more starch and just wet that. And get my iron. This is where using the little tiny irons is really handy on these curves. And I'm using my big one. Again, I can't find my little one right now. And but that's what I usually use, is one of those little irons, the mini irons, Clover mini iron. And so now it's fixed. And again, I can just run my fingernail up under here because at some point I'm going to be taking the paper off and I don't want it all glued down. I like to just stick my finger up in there and I can pop it loose and it still has a nice good crease. So next we're going to put these pieces together. Okay, so I've got my edges prepared. So I've got the green hill, it's folded under. The blue is laying flat because it's going to be the bottom layer of my little row quilt top. And so what I'm going to do is just pull this down over the folded edge. And I'm checking out my little tick marks that I made. And they're off just a little bit. This is where maybe working from the front is a little bit easier because you can really line up the edges of the paper better. But again, then you can't press your fabric over the edge of the freezer paper, which I love to be able to do. So I just slide it up and I can always just tuck my finger up under here. And remember, I didn't use glue. I'm using that starch. So I can just kind of press that up and check and see where my marks are and just get it so where I can see my eye is coming down on those two fabrics standing up and I can see that my lines are matching up really well. I'm just going to slide it just the tiniest smidge. Of course, once you moved it there, you want to check the rest of your lines. And I can feel where they're butting up against each other. It's a lot like nesting seams. Now, this is where I'm going to get the glue out. So I like to use Roxanne's Glue Based It. This is my original bottle that I used, but since I started using it, I went to using the Glue Based in the little accordion style bottle. It's just a little easier for my hand to grip and squeeze, but it's got, both versions have these beautiful little needle-like applicators, and I love them. Try not to lose this little red cap. You can use the glue pens, which I like these for some cases too, but I feel like the Glue Based has a little bit better stick, and when I peel my papers off and I am stitching at the machine, I feel like this holds a little bit better. Also, I'm going to be leaving some open spaces on the lower levels for the gray rail bed and also that one little green hill that is kind of in the in front of the train engine. So just going to lift up that little blue bit and I'm just putting teeny tiny dots of glue. Doesn't take much. Let me pull that around so you can see it. Can you see the little white dots of glue? Not sure you can, but it's just little dots. Does not have to be a continuous string. And you just press it down. And you could leave it like this, but I like to have it set right away. So I hit it with a little bit of my iron, and that dries it just about instantly. And so now it's stuck together. If I use too much glue, it wants to stick to my paper pattern, and I just stick my fingernail up under there and pull it free. But I'll just go down the whole length of this and get that all stuck together. Okay, so I've just finished giving this a good little press on my glue. And let's just flip this over. Now that it's got the glue, it's nice and sturdy. I haven't made the first stitch at all yet, but it makes the nice little, this is your hill. Let me turn it around so you guys can see it in the right orientation. So there's your sky, there's your hill. You've got that kind of that dimensionality that folded edge applique gives to your project. And now I need to do the next bit of hill. Okay, so I've got my next layer all set. That's the bright green piece. And this one is going to go in front of the darker green hills. And this time I've got to be careful to not glue down all of it because our train is going to fit in between two layers of the hills. So I'm just going to match up my marks. And I'm going to only use a little bit of glue to hold this together because I'll likely be popping it apart to fit the train in. But I want to use enough glue that it holds together while I'm working on it. So we want to get that just lined up just so. Remember, it's just like feeling to see if your seams are nesting when you're doing piecing. As far as feeling to see if those edges are together. And I'm checking my arrows. And then I'm going to get my glue. Put my lid where I won't lose it. And I'm going to just put a little bit of glue right here. And give it a little touch of the iron right here. So we're going to end up, there's another little piece that goes in here. You can't see that on the camera. I'll show it to you in a minute. I just want to give just enough glue for all this to stick together and hold those layers together until I get the train pieces in there. I want to fit my train pieces down in between the two hills. Just getting that lined up. And if you feel like it's not holding together real well, you can just give it a little touch of glue, and it's really easy to pop those layers apart when it's time to stick another piece in there. Now I could have gone ahead and put my other little pieces in there before attaching it to the dark green hills. But I wanted to get the three big pieces together first. So I'll flip it. You see how sturdy it is when it's been glued like that. Or at least this side's nice and sturdy. This side's okay. But I've got those open spots here for the train car. Just slide this down. Remember right here, there's going to be a little train rail. Train bed. Not train rail. Train track. Right in front and in back. And so I've got to put those pieces, as well as there's another little hill that goes in over here. And it's the same exact method. That green hill that's going to get put in here and has the tree is going to get tucked under here, and it's going to go on top of this little edge. And then once all the pieces are together, then I'm going to, I can either blanket stitch them, which is what I did on the original one, or I can use a very tiny zigzag. You can also use a very tiny blanket stitch with monofilament thread, and it'll look almost like it was hand appliqued. On the original, I used a large blanket stitch with decorative thread in it, and you can definitely see where I've joined them, and I like that look. It's all up to you. All right, so now I've got my little bag of pieces. Remember, this is the second time I've done this project, so I'm just using my original pieces over again. So this is my hill for over here. And then I've got my 2 gray rail bed pieces. Let's see, this one is the left side. So that will go over here. And then I've got my right side that goes on the other end. And then I've got my other little pieces for the train. I've also got a folded edge where I started to do turned under applique on the train car with the burgundy. And I decided, you know what? Time to go to the fusible web applique. And I have no problem combining those 2 methods in the same project. I know some people might not like that, but I happen to love it. So I wanted to, while I have the camera rolling, I've got the gray ombre fabric. And this comes in the kit. And I've got it so that you use the darkest side for your wheels. And then this nice little gradation where it's going from the very lightest to kind of the middle of the road gray. This is what you want to use for your smoke. So you start with the first piece on the smoke is going to be this darker medium color. Then you're going to go to here where it's starting to transition and then get this lighter gray. And then save the very lightest portion here to put the little light on the front of the train. So one little piece, different areas. And then the gray rail bed. I love trains, but I can't keep all the terminology straight. So the rail bed, the gravel that goes under the train tracks, that's this little piece. And I put it, remember we did the wheels in the darkest. I like the gradation to change from the darker to the medium gray on the rail bed. And it just gives a little bit of dimensionality as it's transitioning here and on the other side of the hill. And it just works out beautifully for the row. And I'm going to get my little green piece and we're going to put in that hill and we'll do the rail bed on this side. And I think you'll be able to see how the whole thing goes together. And I hope you enjoy this pattern. Hit up all the shops for your rows and get your row by row quilt done and turned into a shop and win a nice little prize. So I've got the green and the left hill. Do a bit of glue on this piece. I tried using glue instead of starch the other day just to change things up and decided nope, I like using my starch, not the glue. Flip it over, it makes it a little easier to press that way. We'll warn you, if you start to use glue for freezer paper method and then switch to the starch, the glue that's on there will be reactivated with your starch. It'll be quite sticky. And I didn't mention it before, but when I trim the edge on the curves, I take it over to my cutting board and I hit it with the rotary cutter. You can certainly use scissors. These are great little snips for applique, but for these longer, gentle curves, I mean, I hit it with the rotary cutter. All right, so I've got this little hill and the rail bed put together. Very important to notice that the hill goes underneath the rail bed and the little hill here goes on top of the big hill. And it tucks up under here. And we're going to work from the back, remember. So I'm just flipping it over. I don't have much of this glued down because remember we're putting the train up under here. Let's flip this guy over. So this folded edge is going to go underneath that flat edge. Lining up my marks. Feeling for the edges, making sure nothing's overlapping too badly. And then the gray edge is lining up under here with the green. I'm just feeling my way there, pressing it in, making sure this part of the hill hasn't slid. This method is pretty forgiving. And of course, like I said, in the pattern, you want to give yourself a little bit of extra along the edges in case your applique of these large pieces gets a little bit off. You've got enough. You can go in and trim afterwards. Get that just a little bit here, a little bit here. You don't want to trim this up too much. You also have a gap. I got that middle piece between the gray and the darker green little hill. Just putting some little dots. It doesn't take a lot of glue at all. You want just enough to hold it together. If you don't use enough, when you go to pull the paper off, it's liable to come undone. But because we're using starch to fold our edges over, it releases better from the freezer paper than the glue. So that's in there nice and solid. See? Let's flip it over. Let me turn it so you guys can see it in the correct orientation here. There we go. So we've got our blue sky, our big hill, our little hill, and our rail bed. Then our foreground hill. Get some threads off of there. And it's ready to take it to the machine now if I wanted and start stitching some of this. Or I could go ahead and prepare my train pieces to fit in here for my steam engine, the great 611 steam engine. And I can do all of that all at once if I want. And you've got the, there's a little gap here for the tree that's going to go in here. If you're going to use it as a turned edge applique, the tree trunk will go in here. If you didn't leave that open, it's easy to stick your finger in there and pop it loose. And the flowers that go in here are satin stitch on the sewing machine, decorative stitch for the stems, just to keep those little tiny bits from being too fiddly. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to put the background together. It gives great results for me. I think it'll give you great results as well. I can't wait to see your rows. Again, this is Amy from Sew Simple of Lynchburg here in beautiful Lynchburg, Virginia. And this has been a tutorial on how to do the long pieces of applique in my row by row block featuring the 611 steam engine. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.